But it's cold wherever you are, 3 or 4 degrees out on that wind, and it feels much closer to, if not below, freezing. Still some showers to come this evening. Then across the south, a mixture of sleet and rain at low levels. They scoot away. It turns cold and frosty for a time before more cloud and rain come in from the Atlantic. That will start to lift the temperatures in the west, but certainly for a time through tonight we will again see a fairly extensive frost forming. But things turning milder into the weekend. Still cold enough for some snow on the hills of northern England initially and across the mountains of Scotland, but for most Saturday will be a damp day. Certainly a wet start, a pulse of heavy rain. It looks like moving across England and Wales. Turning drier in the west come Saturday afternoon. A mixture of sunshine and showers, and turning milder, although not feeling very mild, with the wet weather lingering across the eastern side of England. Those set of weather fronts do clear away, and then a bit of a gap between weather systems on Sunday. There'll be some showers across the northwest and later rain across Northern Ireland and Wales. But for many, Sunday is the drier and brighter day this weekend.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and the wonderful Inaya Falarin Imam. We're on your TV and we're on your radio now as well. We're here all the way through until midday, aren't we? The show full of all of today's big stories and those top topics that matter to you.
Absolutely. Make sure that you get in touch with your views as usual. GB Views at gbnews.uk. We'll be reading that out all throughout the show. But first, it's time for the latest news.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. This is your news at 10 o'clock. Troops are being deployed at London hospitals to support the NHS. That's amid growing staff shortages due to COVID-19. The Ministry of Defence has sent 200 personnel to hospitals across the capital. The new recruits are expected to be in the field for the next 3 weeks. Bupa former Chief Medical Officer Andrew Vallance-Owen told GB News that the move is a positive development for the NHS.
People should be reassured that we've had the sense to bring the army in. We saw during the crisis last year or earlier this year, last year now, of course, that the Nightingale hospitals were almost built and staffed by the army, and they did a brilliant job. They didn't have to be used much in the end. So I think I'm reassured by the fact that it is recognised that we need to bring the army in.
Boris Johnson's been criticised by his standards advisor over lost WhatsApp messages in the Downing Street flat renovation row. The newly released messages reveal Johnson discussed Lord Brownlow's plans for a so-called Great Exhibition at the same time as the financing for the flat. Labour says the messages with the Tory donor raise questions about cash for access. They've asked the Common Standards Commissioner to investigate. A second juror in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial has reportedly claimed to have been sexually abused as a child. It follows reports earlier this week that juror Scotty David shared his experiences of abuse during deliberation. A hearing on January the 19th will decide if Maxwell will be retried. Legal analyst Anne Bremner told GB News that a retrial might be likely.
He went into the jury room and used what's called extrinsic evidence, which is his experience as a victim, to educate the other jurors. When you have the non-disclosure in jury selection and then the injection of your own extrinsic evidence, which might be a life experience, there's a presumption that that is prejudicial and there could be a new trial, that combination.
The number of adults living with dementia in the UK is expected to increase by 75%. Researchers say population growth and ageing means 1.6 million people could be living with the condition by 2050. Risk factors that urgently need addressing, according to the study, include high rates of smoking, obesity and diabetes. Pre-departure COVID tests for travellers arriving in England have been scrapped from today. Instead, travellers need to take a lateral flow test no later than the end of day 2 after their arrival. They also no longer need to self-isolate until they receive a negative result. Travel expert Paul Charles told GB News that restrictions had to be scrapped because they weren't effective.
They introduced these changes to help fight Omicron. But from the outset, it was clear Omicron was already pretty active in the UK, so they weren't needed. But the government felt, from a health point of view, they had to introduce these tough, onerous restrictions from the outset. They haven't worked. They haven't stopped Omicron coming into the UK.
Kazakhstan's president has ordered security forces to fire without warning, adding that those who fail to surrender will be destroyed. It comes amid a violent crackdown on anti-government protests sparked by a fuel price hike. Around 2,500 Russian-led forces have been deployed to Kazakhstan as the request of the president Kassym-Jomart Tokayev. The Australian government says Novak Djokovic is free to leave any time. It comes as his family suggests the tennis player is effectively a prisoner. Fans of the tennis star continue to protest over his detention in a quarantine hotel. He's awaiting the outcome of an appeal with authorities over a COVID-19 medical exemption. Officials say 2 other players who entered the country under the same exemption are under investigation. The Australian Home Affairs Minister says everyone is treated fairly in custody.
Mr. Djokovic is not being held captive in Australia. He is free to leave at any time that he chooses to do so, and Border Force will actually facilitate. We treat all people who are in immigration detention fairly, equitably.
The 79th Golden Globes will be a private event. The Hollywood Foreign Press Association says the ceremony will no longer be live streamed. What's more, the winners will be announced in real time on social media. The event's due to take place on Sunday with no red carpet and no celebrity hosts. You're right up to date. I'll have the latest headlines for you in half an hour, but for now it's back to Patrick and Anaya and to the point.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Anaya Iman and Patrick Christie's on your TV and radio. We've got a show full of all of the big stories and big discussions that you care about, to hear what's on the menu.
Yes, indeed. Well, the government is reportedly planning to scrap free NHS prescriptions for over 60s from April, raising the age requirement to 66. How will these changes hit your pocket?
Yes, and the 4 individuals charged over the toppling of the Edward Colston statue in Bristol were found not guilty. What does this mean for the future of our statues?
Well, I'm not sure the future for statues is particularly good, but anyway. And are the goblins, yep, you heard, in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter anti-Semitic. That was the allegation by Jon Stewart earlier in the week before seemingly rowing back yesterday.
Absolutely. Well, we have all of that coming up and much more across the programme, so make sure that you get in touch, as usual, with your views, gbviews at gbnews.uk. But first, Patrick gives his views on the BBC's coverage of the anti-Semitic attack on Oxford Street during Hanukkah.
The BBC accused a bus full of Jewish children of essentially inciting a racist attack against themselves. We all remember the horrific anti-Semitic incident that took place in Oxford Street, London, where a bunch of thugs banged on the windows of a bus full of kids who had just been out celebrating Hanukkah. Well, the BBC claimed that an anti-Muslim slur can be heard in the footage. All right then, let's play the clip.
Come back when we're ready. Whoa.
Well, I don't know about you, but I couldn't hear any anti-Muslim slurs there. I tell you what I can hear, though, and indeed see. That's a group of fully grown racists abusing a bus full of terrified young Jewish children as they tried to go home after celebrating one of the key religious dates in their calendar. Why has the BBC tripped over itself to try to blame the Jewish kids for inciting the racism? The Jewish community was so enraged at this that they've lawyered up. They've actually launched a legal complaint. Good for them. BBC responded by saying that unless the children on that bus are named, apparently, they will be unable to proceed with the legal complaint. The BBC wants the child victims of an anti-Semitic attack to be identified after it accused them of using an anti-Muslim slur. Forgive me, but I hardly think that's the safest thing in the world, do you? There wasn't an anti-Muslim slur there, but let's just hypothetically say that there was, right? Does that justify that kind of behaviour? One person amongst this bunch of 12-year-old children dropped an anti-Muslim slur, and, well, naturally, that completely justifies a group of adults swearing and spitting at them. Unfortunately for the BBC, the audio has now been forensically analysed. What they thought was a racial slur, the words dirty Muslims, apparently, actually, to be precise, was, get this, the Hebrew words for call someone, it's urgent. Yeah. So Professor Zuckerman, who's Chair of Linguistics and Endangered Languages at the University of Adelaide in South Australia, he's a chap who's fluent in 13 languages, by the way. He trawled through the footage and concluded, I was unable to detect any anti-Muslim slur in particular at any point in the footage, either in English or in Hebrew. D3 Forensics is a firm that specialises in digital investigations. They cleaned up this audio, and they've stated D3 Forensics unequivocally confirms that the audio does not contain any racial slur. Professor Zuckerman did say something very interesting, though, ladies and gentlemen, really interesting this. What he suspects is behind the BBC's insistence that an anti-Muslim slur can be heard is something called Apollonian tendency. So apparently this is the wish to make order of unfamiliar information by applying ideas that are already in the brain of the person listening. Well, that might explain a lot, eh? The BBC trips over itself to protect certain communities. All right, fair enough. It appears that the corporation goes out of its way to ensure that nobody's offended, especially, let's be honest now, the Muslim community. Just take, for example, the BBC's online coverage of the Telford grooming gang scandal. At the time, the UK's largest and one of the longest-running grooming gang scandals. More than 1,000 vulnerable, young, working-class girls systematically raped, beaten and tortured by a group of men of South Asian heritage. Well, there wasn't really any coverage of it. For the first 24 hours after the story broke, I was waiting for the story to drop on the BBC's homepage, and then, all of a sudden, there it was, as a second story on their local Shropshire page. Not on the homepage. I know this because I actually personally called the BBC at the time to ask why it appeared that they cared more about preserving the sensitivities of some elements of the British Muslim community instead of reporting the fact that thousands of girls have been systematically abused. The BBC is supposed to be for everyone, isn't it? It's the public broadcaster. It's ours. It's for all of us. But it appears to be working potentially more for some than others. Again, could it be the perception? Could it be the perception that one form of racism is potentially more acceptable than another? As I've previously alluded to, the BBC sometimes thinks it's doing a public duty by protecting us from ourselves and, in my opinion anyway, deliberately underreporting things like grooming gang scandals because it doesn't want to incite racism. I don't agree with it. I can see an element of logic to it, but I don't agree with it. It likes to brand itself as standing up for the marginalised in society, victims in a way. Well, around 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust, and anti-Semitic incidents in the UK have hit record levels. Perhaps they could start by sticking up for that community. Look, if the BBC devoted as much attention to investigating and exposing child grooming gang scandals as it did essentially, in my opinion, trying to find an excuse for why a group of men of Arab origin spat at a load of Jewish kids, then maybe the licence fee would be better value for money. Yeah, it just winds me up a bit, obviously.
Yeah, no, there's clearly very passionate words there, Patrick, and I think it's really important that you have been very forthright against anti-Semitism. It's a scourge within society, and I think it's absolutely disgusting when we consistently hear these attacks happening, and the sense of complacency within society is abhorrent, especially as you rightly mentioned, compared to how we respond to other accusations of racism and so on. But I think the point that you make about how they responded to the grooming gang scandal is a really interesting one, because I think that when mainstream institutions, when mainstream sources do not actually take these issues seriously, what they end up doing is giving space to maybe far-right groups or other types of groups to actually take over the conversation and weaponise it for whatever reason. And I think that actually you're doing a disservice to racism and division within society by not actually addressing it and confronting it head-on.
I agree, and I think that's part of the problem. And I do find it absolutely staggering, you know, that they felt the need, anyway, to kind of almost qualify this racist attack. Well, you know, hey, look, what you can see in that footage there is a bunch of fully grown men shouting, screaming, spitting at a bus full of children. But, hey, you can hear a word come from that bus. So what? I mean, it turns out they were wrong about that, by the way, but so what? Anyway, it doesn't justify it at all, does it?
I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. I mean, if you're going to make that kind of claim, then you absolutely must have some strong evidence to support it. And as you rightfully mentioned, that does not in any way justify such horrendous behaviour coming from those men. And I hope that they do experience the full force of the law, because that is not acceptable within a democratic society. And I feel very sad that continually, again, Jewish people are having to be on the receiving end of such disgusting abuse.
Absolutely. I think it goes under the radar. Look, any form of racism is obviously absolutely, completely and utterly abhorrent. Of course it is, and needs to be stamped out of society. And we see racism, unfortunately, in all its forms, right? However, I do fear that in this country, anti-Semitism is A, rising, and B, underreported, and actually C, I don't think cared about as much. I think, for whatever reason it doesn't seem to be deemed as bad, I think, maybe, potentially, as other forms of racism by some people in society. But get your views coming in, people. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Gideon Falter is the Chief Executive of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, a volunteer-led charity dedicated to exposing and countering anti-Semitism through education and zero-tolerance law enforcement, and he joins us now. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, I don't know if you caught Patrick's monologue there, but are you surprised about some of the allegations that have come out against the BBC in relation to the handling of the reporting of those anti-Semitic incidents that happened last year?
I mean, the BBC has got a long history with the Jewish community of failing to act against anti-Semitism, of appalling coverage sometimes. And we've seen them saying things like Jews or Israelis are playing the Holocaust card. We've seen them making all sorts of inappropriate comparisons. And then with this incident on Oxford Street, we just see a bunch of Jewish teenagers trying to celebrate the festival of Hanukkah. They are set upon by a group of youths who start doing Nazi salutes. They start spitting, shouting, throwing things, banging the bus that they were on with their shoes, with their hands, running after them, basically hounding them out of central London for having the gall to celebrate a Jewish festival in public. And in and amongst this, there's a whole load of footage that goes up on social media, and the BBC claims, uniquely amongst all news outlets, that it has heard an anti-Muslim slur within that footage. And it's just staggering, because we've listened to that footage, audio specialists have listened to that footage. No one can hear an anti-Muslim slur. There is lots of indistinct shouting, people saying in Hebrew, "We need to get out of here," all sorts of different voices intertwined. But nothing that anyone, I think, would be able to say could be clearly heard as an anti-Muslim slur, but that's what the BBC is saying. And it's a complete distraction from the incident itself, which is the terrible thing.
It is, and it's the only conclusion that I can come to from that is that it was almost an attempt at a justification. It was almost an attempt at, well, hey, look, there was a racial slur, and therefore, well, it doesn't justify anything at all. What I thought was interesting, Professor Zuckerman, who I believe maybe the Jewish Chronicle potentially got to trawl over this footage anyway, came out and said that he thought it might have been this thing called Apollonian tendency, right, which is basically when you can't quite hear something or you can't quite make it out, and something within you, try and make sense of it by coming up with something a thought that's already in your head, as it were. The implication being there, isn't it, that actually the BBC almost wanted to find some kind of justification for this attack. How do you feel about all of that, the way the BBC has gone about this?
I mean, look, we had the former chairman of the BBC, Lord Grade, on our podcast against anti-Semitism a couple of weeks ago, and he even said that this was a very, very poor piece of journalism. He called it a pig's ear of a piece. And, it just... first of all, if there was some anti-Muslim racism, then let's see the evidence of it and let's have whoever said it held to account. But to try and say, well, maybe the attack was provoked or something like that, based on no audio that we can hear, based on no evidence that they can present publicly, it just seems that the BBC is almost trying to sort of justify what happened or excuse what happened. Without having any reason for doing so. And as the nation's public broadcaster, they need to hold themselves to an extremely high standard. And if they've got evidence, they can't keep on saying that they're not going to release it publicly, they're just going to sort of listen to it secretly in their studio. Evidence is evidence, and they're a journalist, so they should be putting that out publicly. And it's an appalling thing for them to be slurring and smearing these teenagers who were attacked for having the gall to celebrate a Jewish festival in public. It's an appalling thing for the BBC to be, without evidence, slurring them like this.
Yeah.
I think many people will agree with what you've expressed so far, Gideon. But just on the question of anti-Semitism more broadly, I want to be kind of fair to people that sometimes put forward counter-arguments in relation to how we discuss anti-Semitism. And what do you make of this idea that kind of anti-Zionism is sometimes conflated with anti-Semitism? I think recently Emma Watson, the Harry Potter actress, posted a picture in solidarity with Palestinians, and many people accused her of anti-Semitism for doing that, and that was suggested by some that is kind of conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Do you worry at all about that conflation, or do you think it is important to suggest that some forms of anti-Zionism is actually anti-Semitism?
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, the Oxford Street incident obviously didn't have anything to do with Israel or Zionism or anything like that. It was just a group of Jewish teenagers out to celebrate a Jewish festival. So, something like that, there's no conflation. But with the whole Harry Potter story, again, there isn't really anything there relating to sort of Israel or Zionism. But what I think we should make very clear is that criticism of Israel is absolutely fine, just like you can criticize any country. And I think it's very important to recognize that the international definition of anti-Semitism actually says within it that criticism of Israel, like criticism of any other country, is perfectly all right and not anti-Semitic. The difficulty comes when people start using the Jewish state of Israel as a means to attack Jews anywhere around the world. So, for example, if they start saying that Israelis are behaving like the new Nazis or something like that, it's very clearly not just criticism of Israel. This is an attempt to wound Jews particularly, and that's where the crossover happens. It's not conflation, it's just pure anti-Semitism.
Yeah, absolutely. Gideon, look, thank you very much for your time this morning. Great to have the conversation. Called Gideon Falls there, Chief Executive of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, which is a volunteer-led charity dedicated to exposing and countering anti-Semitism through education, of course. Well, there we go. Look, your views have been flooding in. We're going to go to those very shortly. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Make sure you keep them coming. But after the break, have you actually been able to buy a house recently? Sorry, I nearly choked on my words then. Of course you haven't. Anyway, we'll be checking in with you, the public, see how you've been navigating the current housing crisis. Goodness me. Anyway, but first, it's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Not for the first time this week. There's a cold breeze blowing out there, bringing some sunshine, certainly across eastern areas, but also quite a few wintry showers in the west. So sleet, hail, and in places some snow. Low pressure is dominating up to the north, and we've got this little kind of breakaway weather front bringing thicker cloud and wet weather to South Wales and southwest England. That's mostly rain, but it does have some snow mixed in over the hills of Devon and Somerset for a time. Further north, we do have some sleet and snow showers packing into northwest England, western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, and we'll continue to see those wintry showers through the rest of the day. Much of the east, bar the odd shower, dry and bright with some sunshine, but it feels cold. Temperatures 3 or 4, add on that wind, it feels sub-zero. We'll keep a few scattered showers going across the west through this evening, but for most it turns dry and cold. We will see a frost forming, certainly early on, but look at this, more cloud and rain then comes in through the night, and that will have the effect of lifting the temperatures. So frosty this evening. By morning, most places will be back above freezing. As the wet weather arrives, it will bring some snow across the hills of Scotland, certainly for a time on Saturday morning, but mostly it's just a wet old Saturday morning, and the rain likely to turn heavy at times over England and Wales, particularly through the afternoon across the south, with some gusty winds along the south coast too. Many places, though, brightening up through the afternoon with some sunshine, and after we start pretty mild, temperature actually dropping a little bit through the afternoon, but still milder than it has been. Quite a few showers then coming into western areas during Saturday evening. Some snow likely to continue over the higher routes across western Scotland. And then we go into Sunday. We'll keep the showers going in the west, certainly initially, but much of the east will be dry and bright. And for many, we should see a bit more sunshine on Sunday compared to Saturday. Goodbye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Now, it's 10:26, just about, a.m., and you're watching To The Point. Patrick Christie's and Inaya Falarin Iman right here on GB News, and, of course, listening to us on the radio as well. It's the modern world, everybody.
Yes, indeed. Well, the average house price in the UK hit a record high of £276,091 in December. Halifax House Price Index recorded an annual high of 9.8%.
Well, Wales apparently tops the nation list, while in England, the North West remains the best performing region, yes, my neck of the woods, and London, the weakest for annual inflation. Scotland saw an increase of 9.7%, Making it the most expensive on record. Well, our East of England reporter, Amelia Harper, went to St Albans, which has seen a surge of first-time buyers, apparently, to ask people what they thought about current house prices.
House prices are high around here, which is not great for the younger people that are all trying to buy houses. So as a result, local youngsters that are local are tending to move in areas that are slightly further out, which obviously boosts prices further out as well.
My children probably can't afford to go into their own property at the moment.
I think they're definitely too high, just ridiculously high.
We live in St Albans. We've lived here for about 18 months now, and we're looking to buy, but it's just far too expensive for us here. So
it's about $500,000 for a 2-bed house at the moment.
It's really expensive. So I think, you know, we're going to have to either continue to rent or look elsewhere, which is quite sad because we like it here.
We love it here, yeah.
Well, I would say it's absolute madness. From the difference between up north to down south, depending on the counties, just crazy, really. Wherever you look to buy your first home, anyway.
Right, well, there we go. How do you feel about house prices?
Oh, I mean, to me, this is part of the supposed levelling up agenda, which is meant to be ensuring that, you know, young people in particular, and anyone under 40 really, can have a stake within society and get on the housing ladder. We remember, you know, Margaret Thatcher talked about a property-owning democracy, allowing many people that had social housing to buy their own council properties. And now, you know, there almost seems to be nothing in place to enable young people in particular to get on the housing ladder. I think it's disgraceful.
No, I quite like the way that estate agents try and zhuzh it up a bit, don't they? When basically what they've done is they've shown you a box under the stairs, like an early years Harry Potter, and tried to say, look, this will only set you back £500,000, you know. And they try and jazz it up, don't they? Like, hey, look, the benefit that you get with this property, right, is you can sit on your bed while you cook your dinner and have a shower. And it's fantastic. You don't get that. You don't get that in a sprawling country estate. Let me tell you that much. Like, no, you don't, Gary, and I don't want to buy it. But anyway, there we go. How are you doing with regards to property prices at the moment? Maybe you've got one on the market, maybe you're in the market. GBViews at gbnews.uk. How do you feel about it? Is it all going a little bit crazy? Do you feel like it's about to pop? I can't help but feel like the property market's going to pop.
But I mean, it's property now. Energy prices are going through the roof. We know the national insurance hike. It just seems like the cost of living in every single area of society is being expanded, and public purses of ordinary people are being squeezed. I think it's bad.
I just don't see how. I mean, I'm sure our very own Liam Halligan, you're on the money, will be explaining stuff like this later on, because obviously he is very much on the money. But it just seems to me like it's completely unsustainable the way that we're going. Energy prices going up, everything going up, frankly, you know. And it's got to pop at some point. But
well, let's hope it doesn't, you know, pop in a way that harms ordinary people.
No, although we have just also found out that apparently there's a new virulent strain of bird flu. So, you know, hey, we might not make it to the pop, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just wait and see. Not now, bird flu. We've had enough. But anyway, what else have we got coming up?
Indeed. Well, a second juror in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial has reportedly claimed to have been sexually abused as a child. It follows reports earlier this week that juror Scotty David shared his experiences of abuse during deliberation.
Well, a hearing on January the 19th will decide if Maxwell will be retried even, sorry about that. And we will, of course, update you as the story develops. So there we go. Yeah, interesting one, that, isn't it, really? I mean,
it just seems like that case is just a can of worms. It just keeps bringing up new issues.
Yeah, absolutely. It does seem like it's not going away anytime soon, I think. But what else have we got coming up then? We're going to actually go to the inbox. That's what we're doing right now. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Thank you very much. So yes, people have been getting in touch, massively so actually, earlier on about what we're talking about regarding the BBC's coverage, really. BBC's coverage of the anti-Semitic attack that took place on Oxford Street in London. You remember that one? Bus full of Jewish children, load of people shouting at them, spitting at them, doing Nazi salutes, all sorts of stuff, right? And yes, and loads of you have been getting in touch. The BBC is just an anti-broadcasting company. They are anti the royal family. They're anti everything, and that's from Tony. So thank you very much. Hopefully we bring you a little bit more positivity. Yes, there we are. And lots of people as well getting in touch about that. basically saying, let's remember that some people really, really struggle to see the difference in racism, different types of racism, and that is Gordon's view. And I think that's kind of one of the points I was making, really, Gordon, which is that I suspect, I fear anyway, that in this country one type of racism is seen as being less bad than another, I think.
Yeah, no, I do think that is something that is possibly the case, and I think that's very, very worrying. I mean, we had the Azim Rafiq allegations, and rightly so, there was a lot of controversy, media attention, and significant discussion within society about what we can do about that, you know, how far we've come as a society, etc. But when it comes to incidents like this, there is very, very little discussion about it.
Yeah, Sue's been in touch. Cracking email this in from Halifax. Great show, guys. Thank you very much. I do not understand why people are actually anti-Semitic. Even if they have views relating to Israel and Palestine, that does not justify unacceptable behaviour towards anyone from Israel or indeed the Jewish faith. And that's true, isn't it? That's true. And that's kind of the point, really, isn't it? I think all too often it's a bit conflated, isn't it? And Brenda's been in touch about your views, right, about the housing crisis. It's all right, it's all good, it's all good. Says, I think I now identified the issue. Social housing was sold off in the 80s and never replaced. We need a big investment in social housing for people starting out. And people are saying, yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly an issue at the moment, especially in London, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I just think, you know, the Tories have been speaking about, for example, some polls showing that 70% of young people are supporting of socialism. But I think part of that is to do with the fact that, you know, the promise is that you're going to be better off than your parents. But many economic research has found that this generation may well be one of the first generation in decades that is actually worse off than their parents. And so obviously you're going to start looking at alternative views and alternative policies in order to realise your economic aspirations. And I think it's a very easy thing for the Conservatives to do if they want to get the vote of young people.
Yeah, I always feel a little bit uneasy. I mean, I think you're right. I always feel a little bit uneasy when I think a lot of people, certainly around my age, I think are inclined to talk about how hard they've got it, right, and everything. And there are areas that are hard. I mean, certainly property ownership, especially in the capital, is just a pipe dream for most people.
In the South East, really.
In the South East, really, right? So there is that, fine. But actually, in many ways, we've never had it so good, have we? We've got fantastic stuff going on for people of my generation.
I mean, do you mean the lockdown? You know,
yeah, but we all had a lockdown. It wasn't just young people, you know.
No, but you know that, you know, this particular area of life has been particularly hard for young people.
Well,
do you disagree?
It's been one of the elements of society who've had it hard. I think we're a bit too entitled, young people. Anyway, right, coming up, a new law will tackle statue vandals. That's right, after Edward Colston protesters were cleared of criminal charges. We'll discuss that and more right here on GB News.
Yes, take us with you. You can listen to GB News on DAB+, but now it's time for the headlines.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. It's 10:34. Here are the latest headlines. Troops are being deployed at London hospitals to support the NHS. That's amid growing staff shortages due to COVID-19. The Ministry of Defence has sent 200 personnel to hospitals across the capital, and talks are underway to expand the scheme across the UK. The new recruits are expected to be in the field for the next 3 weeks. Boris Johnson has been criticised by his standards advisor over lost WhatsApp messages in the Downing Street flat renovation row. The newly released chat reveals Johnson discussed Lord Brownlow's plans for a so-called Great Exhibition at the same time as the financing for the flat. Labour says the messages with the Tory donor raised questions about cash for access and asked the Common Standards Commissioner to investigate. A second juror in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial has reportedly claimed to have been sexually abused as a child. It follows reports earlier this week that juror Scotty David shared his experiences of abuse during deliberation. A hearing will be held on January the 19th to decide if Maxwell will be retried. Pre-departure COVID tests for travellers arriving in England have been scrapped from today. Instead, travellers need to take a lateral flow test no later than the end of day 2 after their arrival. They also no longer need to self-isolate until they receive a negative result. The Australian government says Novak Djokovic is free to leave any time. It comes after his family suggested the tennis player was effectively a prisoner due to his detention in a quarantine hotel. He's awaiting the outcome of an appeal over COVID-19 medical exemption. Officials say 2 other players who entered the country under the same exemption are under investigation. That's it for now. I'll have more on today's main stories for you at the top of the hour. We'll see you then.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. It's 10:38, and this is, of course, To The Point with me, Patrick Christie's, and Inaya Falarin Iman on GB News. We're live on your TV and on your radio this morning.
Yes, absolutely. Well, today marks the 7th anniversary of the attack by Islamist terrorists on the offices of French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo, which killed 12 people and injured 11 others.
Gosh, yeah, we all remember that, don't we? With us now to discuss this is our home and security editor, the one and only Mark White. Mark, thank you very much. Look, tell us about this 7th anniversary, really, and potentially any memories, I suppose, you might have of that day as well, you know, reporting.
Yeah, well, I think we all share the horror at seeing what happened on that day. The images were so widely circulated. Of course, the devastating attack on the offices itself, in which 12 people died, including police officers outside. And I think it was in particular, the images of that police officer lying down in the street, injured, one of the terrorists going up to that police officer and shooting him dead at point blank range, you know, on video, which was so horribly shocking. And then, of course, the whole incident unfolded over the course of 3 days and ended up with a siege at a kosher supermarket. And again, you know, more injuries and deaths. And yeah, it was absolutely terrible. That was an attack that at that time was carried out on behalf or inspired by Al-Qaeda. And then, of course, we had, towards the end of that same year, 7 years ago, the Bataclan attacks that were inspired and carried out on behalf of the Islamic State, which led to more than 130 deaths after these attacks on cafes and restaurants, and then the Bataclan theatre itself. So absolutely horrific. And although we have not had terrorist attacks quite on the scale of that since, we have had a lot of terrorist attacks still in France and other countries in Europe. Even last year I was in Nice reporting when an attacker targeted the cathedral in Nice and beheaded one of the worshippers there. You know, it's absolutely awful. It's still a threat that's out there.
I mean, one of the things I remember about the Charlie Hebdo attacks was actually a show of unity that happened immediately after. We had the Je suis Charlie international hashtag. We had many global leaders going to Paris in order to show solidarity. And there did seem to be this sense that this was an attack fundamentally on French values of tolerance and liberty. But actually, that that goal didn't seem to be really realised because, as you rightfully mentioned, terror continued to seemingly escalate in the months and years following that incident.
Yeah, and it's evolved as a threat. So those were big, as the terrorists would describe them, as spectaculars in terms of multiple people involved in targeting multiple areas and trying to kill as many people as possible. What we've had since, by and large, are the more low-tech attacks that can still be deadly and very clearly very traumatic and frightening, such as the attack on Nice. We've had police officers targeted in areas across France by Islamists who've gone up to police officers, engaged them in conversation, then taken out a knife and stabbed them, targeted them outside police stations as well. And it's not just a French problem. It is a problem that we are seeing in other European countries. Germany suffered from 2 attacks last year. There was one by a failed asylum seeker in Bavaria, which killed 3 people, a knife attack there. So it is a problem. It's not on the scale in terms of the spectaculars that we saw in 2015-16. And of course, we then saw in this country in 2017 with 5 separate terrorist attacks, all inspired by Islamic State. I should say there was one right-wing attack as well at Finsbury Park Mosque. But yeah, we're not seeing the spectaculars in that sense. But in this country, we did see, of course, the Manchester Arena attack, which was, a plot that was more sophisticated in terms of constructing a device, which may have, of course, been the result of that Liverpool Children's Hospital attack that took place before Christmas, had that device fully detonated as well. So the threat is still out there of significant casualty attacks.
And also, I mean, Sadiq Khan was criticised, the London mayor, for saying that violence or certain types of behaviour is something that should be normal or is normal when living in a big city. But when you see these incidents like this and the terror attacks across the Western world, in some sense it does seem that there is a truth to that now, that this has become the reality of life in Western society.
Yeah, I mean, we're all told, and the messaging is out there, that sort of run, hide, tell messaging that's out there differs slightly in America. I think they say run, hide, and fight. If that's your last resort, die or fight. They say, fight back. So yeah, populations are being told. I was reporting in the lead up to Christmas, messaging from counter-terrorism policing that look, be vigilant over Christmas because there is a significant risk of a terror attack over the festive period. Luckily, we didn't see that. But on Monday, we had an incident at a police station in Oldham where a patrol car going out on patrol was approached by a man who, according to the police, attacked the car, tried to attack the officers inside. He was tasered. He has subsequently now been arrested under the Terrorism Act as well. So the threat remains.
It does indeed. Just relatively quickly, Mark, if we can, I suppose, but we talked then about the Charlie Hebdo, obviously, 7th anniversary of that attack. The Bataclan also, as we mentioned before, was a real turning point. These were real turning points, I think. What has changed, maybe here potentially anyway, in the way that we're approaching terrorism, in the way that we operate now as regards to it?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of resources that have been piled into the security services and the police, but their caseload has gone up very significantly as well. So they are, like everybody else in the public sphere, trying to deal with an increased workload, and resources have been diminished. Resources are increasing, but they are tracking tens of thousands of people who are described as extremist with a potential to cross over into violent extremism. They have to make assessments all of the time as to where to devote their time and attention in more detailed investigations into these individuals. And there are hundreds of these investigations ongoing at any one time. They're juggling balls all of the time. Most of the time they get it absolutely right. We never hear about that quite rightly. Occasionally they miss someone who, with a low sophistication attack, only needs to go and get a knife or get behind the wheel of a car. It's very difficult to sort of necessarily get a handle on that when there's no specific plotting that involves lots of people that the security services can pick up on. So occasionally people get through, there are big inquiries about it, but most of the time, you know, they're doing a good job and keeping us safe.
Absolutely. Mark, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time, for whizzing us through that, of course. Mark White there, our Home and Security Editor. Just discussing initially, anyway, the 7th anniversary of those Charlie Hebdo shootings. I can remember that day. I can remember those days, actually. I remember that day crystal clear. And like you said, I can very vividly remember the marches taking place in Paris, actually, and that show of unity and the kind of those candles and everything. And
it seemed very short-lived. I mean, there was actually a counter hashtag that happened, I am not Charlie, not too long afterwards. And so I think that, it was a moment that I very much remembered very strongly, and I think it really changed the face of terrorism in the sense that this is such a significant threat in Western society, in Europe in particular.
I think it's just an interesting one. Mark raised an interesting point there, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to throw it over to you, really, if you don't mind, gbviews at gbnews.uk, which is that difference, isn't it, between our messaging over here, which is, hide and tell, right, basically, as opposed to in America, where it's like fight, OK? I just wonder, how do you feel like you'd respond? Because it is one of these unanswerable questions, hopefully we never have to find out, right? But how would you respond, do you think? Do you think you would be inclined to just leg it? Do you think you would be inclined to fight? It's that fight on flight thing, isn't it? Let us know. gbviews at gbnews.uk.
Well, now, a minister says new tough laws will tackle protesters who damage statues. Earlier, a jury cleared 4 protesters of criminal damage for removing the statue of Edward Colston.
Yes, well, Colston is a 17th century slave trader, and his statue was thrown into the harbour in Bristol during a Black Lives Matter protest. So, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps suggested that loopholes in the law were helping vandals to evade prosecution and that legislation going through Parliament could close them.
Yes, the 4 accused vandals were acquitted on Wednesday of criminal wrongdoing, sparking a national conversation on heritage and racial identity. Here's what one of the accused protesters, Rhian Graham, had to say outside of Bristol Crown Court.
We just want to say thank you to so many people because we have never been alone in this journey. We've been so supported and we are, we're such a small part of this, really. Everybody on the day, those 10,000 people that marched the streets of Bristol in the name of equality, for our love. Exactly. All the road pullers, the statue climbers.
Good grief.
Wow, they're clearly very ecstatic, understandably. Well, let's speak now to GB News' very own Calvin Robinson about this. Thank you for joining us, Calvin. I mean, one of the things I worry, because, Grant Shapps has said that there is some loopholes that potentially needs to be closed in order to prevent vandals. But even if we disagree, or some people might disagree with this result, there is a worry that there could be a counter-reaction to push through illiberal policies against people protesting. Do you worry about that at all?
I do, and we should always be cautious whenever the government says they want to clamp down on protesting. As we saw last year around COVID, they wanted to really stamp it out so that they couldn't see any be held to account, and we don't want that at all. But what this is a loophole in the law around criminal damage. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I've taken a lot of stick on Twitter for commenting on this case over the last couple of days. But the clause is quite clear that for it to be criminal damage, there has to be damage to the property. Okay, so we all saw that was on video. The property has to belong to someone else. It clearly didn't belong to the protesters. And there has to be intent to damage or reckless behaviour with no care for damage. We saw that. We saw all 3 of those clauses being met. The 4th one, the loophole, is that the defendant can have a legal excuse for damaging the property. And that's what we're seeing, in that these 4, the Colston 4, have said they had a legal excuse for damaging the property, and that is to prevent further crime, to prevent hate crime, as if a statue in itself can be a hate crime. Now, and I've said on record that I think this sets a very bad precedent, and I'm not talking about legal precedent, I'm talking about a general precedent in the country, in that if we say it's okay for you to damage public property or other people's property if you think it's offensive, which is what a hate crime is, therefore anyone can knock down any statue or any public memorial that they feel uncomfortable with. And Darren Grimes put out a witty tweet yesterday: should we all go and knock down Karl Marx's statue because his ideology has killed millions of people around the world? Of course, it was tongue-in-cheek, he never would do it. But this is the problem, isn't it? If we see something that we can claim is offensive, we now have a loophole in the law to say, yeah, I'm going to go and be a vigilante, and rather than follow the democratic process. And this is why I'm so upset about this case, because these thugs, these vandals, these rioters had a democratic process. They could have either stood for office, they could have voted for different people in Bristol in the local elections, or they could have had their say through petitions and protests, which I know that some of them have done. But the problem is they didn't do that. They chose unlawful action, and they got away with it because the jury looked at the case through a political lens, and it's outrageous.
Calvin, I think you make an important point about maybe there is a conversation then as a society to move this conversation on and look at whether or not we have enough local democracy within society where ordinary people can actually have platforms and ways in which they can affect change in their local community. But what do you make of the kind of counter-argument who says that the Colston situation is very specific in the sense that he was someone that some people would argue his flaws outweighed his achievements, and that his case is very specific and shouldn't necessarily be extrapolated to worry about all of our statutes, and we should look at that on its own terms specifically?
Well, it's very subjective, isn't it? Because his flaws were terrible. You know, he was involved in the slave trade. That's an evil way of making money. I think we would all agree with that. But if we look at what were his pros, and I'm not saying his pros outweigh the cons, but his pros were he set up almshouses, hospitals, charities, funded the local area. A lot of the infrastructure around Bristol, it was set up by him and his family and the legacy. So I'm not saying they balance out, but what I'm saying is you have to look at history holistically, and who says where the pros and cons outweigh each other. Look at Winston Churchill. I happen to think he was a hero. I think he was one of the most important, most significant figures in preventing fascism in the 20th century. Some people will say, no, he's a bigot and a racist. Who gets the final say on how bad or how good a person is? Because that's not what a statue is about anyway. It's not to say this person was a saint, because even the saints were not perfect. It's to say this person made a contribution to this part of the world, and we put this up to remember that. But we can also remember the bad things that we did. And I know Colston had a plaque already, and I know there were already petitions in place, but that's another part of the democratic process. And what these people fail to see is that, yes, they might have done petitions, they might have held polls, but they didn't win them. And if you don't win, you have to have losers' consent in a democracy. Just because you've gone through the process doesn't mean you're going to get your own way. And if you don't get your own way, you do not get to tear down statues. You do not get to just tear things down and destroy things, because that's throwing a tantrum.
No, I think, many people will echo your sentiments, Calvin. I mean, one of the things that I worry about as well is that, these people are claiming to be doing this, for anti-racism and so on. And it seems to be premised on a very patronising idea of ethnic minority people and black people in particular, that we cannot handle the complexities of history, that, we walk past a statue that, may have been, someone may have been involved in the slave trade, and we cower in fear, and we can't live within society unless all of them are removed. I mean, sometimes I think that actually it's this way of thinking, this racial thinking, that is doing more damage to race relations in this country than otherwise.
Well, I don't know the racial makeup of the Colston Four, but they didn't look very BLM to me. I haven't personally walked past any statue and taken offence of it because of the colour of my skin. I don't know if you can say the same, Anaya. I would assume that you haven't really taken much offence to inanimate objects because you're not that kind of sensitive person. But this is the problem. Are people really walking past these memorials and these statues and say, oh my gosh, I can no longer live the rest of my day, this is horrible? Or are people taking offence on behalf of other people? Is it middle class people with what we call white guilt that are getting involved and saying, oh, those poor black people cannot handle that, let's get rid of it for them? It's passionate.
Well, and actually, has it now properly infiltrated our legal system in that sense, Kevin? Because you mentioned there about the jury. Can you imagine maybe if they'd have gone, right, OK, well, you're guilty of this, right? And actually...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so actually it's got involved. It's right in there, isn't it, in our legal system?
It is. And of course they would be afraid of the consequences of their actions if the jury, if they had declared that these thugs were guilty, because the whole of Black Lives Matter movement would have been in uproar, and we would have seen more riots and more protests, and maybe their lives would have been at risk.
They'd have found out who the jury was, and they'd have... Yeah, exactly.
But there was the quote that, you want to be on the right side of history, and that's a very dangerous quote to throw at a jury who are making a decision whether someone committed criminal damage or not whether they were on the right side of politics, and that is the problem. And I do want to address, for clarity and for, to be completely open, that our news station was investigated at the time of this case for contempt, and we were found not guilty of contempt for discussing the matter. And I just want to put that out there because people are saying, how can you discuss this matter without saying that you guys were looked into? Yeah, we were looked into. We were not found guilty of contempt. We are able to express our opinions on this matter. Thank you very much.
Well, good stuff. And you certainly did that rather well, Calvin. As always, Calvin Robinson there. Our very own, ladies and gentlemen. Good stuff. Thank you for that. Whizzing us through loads of comments already on this, by the way. Loads of comments already on this, on the Colston 4. Keep them coming in. We're going to go to those later. Keep all your thoughts coming in on email, gbnews@gbnews.uk. We'll be back very, very shortly. But first, it's time for a quick break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Not for the first time this week, there's a cold breeze blowing out there, bringing some sunshine, certainly across eastern areas, but also quite a few wintry showers in the west, so sleet, hail, and in places some snow. Low pressure is dominating up to the north, and we've got this little kind of breakaway weather front bringing thicker cloud and wet weather to South Wales and southwest England. That's mostly rain, but it does have some snow mixed in over the hills of Devon and Somerset for a time. Further north, we do have some sleet and snow showers packing into northwest England, western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, and we'll continue to see those wintry showers through the rest of the day. Much of the east, bar the odd shower, dry and bright with some sunshine, but it feels cold. Temperatures 3 or 4, add on that wind, it feels sub-zero. We'll keep a few scattered showers going across the west through this evening, but for most it turns dry and cold. We will see a frost forming, certainly early on, but look at this, more cloud and rain then comes in through the night, and that will have the effect of lifting the temperatures. So frosty this evening. By morning, most places will be back above freezing. As the wet weather arrives, it will bring some snow across the hills of Scotland, certainly for a time on Saturday morning, but mostly it's just a wet old Saturday morning, and the rain likely to turn heavy at times over England and Wales, particularly through the afternoon across the south, with some gusty winds along the south coast too. Many places, though, brightening up through the afternoon with some sunshine, and after we start, pretty mild temperature, actually dropping a little bit through the afternoon, but still milder than it has been. Quite a few showers then coming into western areas during Saturday evening. Some snow likely to continue over the higher routes across western Scotland. And then we go into Sunday. We'll keep the showers going in the west, certainly initially, but much of the east will be dry and bright. And for many, we should see a bit more sunshine on Sunday compared to Saturday. Goodbye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, everyone. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Inaya Falarin Iman on your TV and on your radio as well. We're here all the way through until midday with all those bigger stories and the topics that you really care about.
Yes, absolutely. We'll make sure that you get in touch with your views. As usual, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be reading that out all throughout the show. But first, here's the latest news.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. This is your news at 11 o'clock. Troops are being deployed at London hospitals to support the NHS. That's amid growing staff shortages due to COVID-19. The Ministry of Defence has sent 200 personnel to hospitals across the capital, and talks are underway to expand the scheme across the UK. The new recruits are expected to be in the field for the next 3 weeks. Bupa former Chief Medical Officer Andrew Vallance-Owen told GB News that the move is a positive development for the NHS.
People should be reassured that we've had the sense to bring the army in. We saw during the crisis last year or earlier this year, last year now, of course, that the Nightingale hospitals were almost built and staffed by the army, and they did a brilliant job. They didn't have to be used much in the end. So I think I'm reassured by the fact that it is recognised that we need to bring the army in.
Boris Johnson's been criticised by his standards advisor over lost WhatsApp messages in the Downing Street flat renovation row. The newly released messages reveal Johnson discussed Lord Brownlow's plans for a so-called Great Exhibition at the same time as the financing for the flat. Labour says the messages with the Tory donor raise questions about cash for access. They've asked the Commons Standards Commissioner to investigate. A second juror in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial has reportedly claimed to have been sexually abused as a child. It follows reports earlier this week that juror Scotty David shared his experiences of abuse during deliberation. A hearing on January the 19th will decide if Maxwell will be retried. Legal analyst Anne Bremner told GB News that a retrial might be likely.
He went into the jury room and used what's called extrinsic evidence, which is his experience as a victim, to educate the other jurors. When you have the non-disclosure in jury selection, and then the injection of your own extrinsic evidence, which might be a life experience, there's a presumption that that is prejudicial and there could be a new trial, that combination.
The number of adults living with dementia in the UK is expected to increase by 75%. Researchers say population growth and ageing means 1.6 million people could be living with the condition by 2050. Risk factors that urgently need addressing, according to the study, include high rates of smoking, obesity and diabetes. Pre-departure COVID tests for travellers arriving in England have been scrapped from today. Instead, travellers need to take a lateral flow test no later than the end of day 2 after their arrival. They also no longer need to self-isolate until they receive a negative result. Travel expert Paul Charles told GB News that the restrictions had to be scrapped because they weren't effective.
They introduced these changes to help fight Omicron. But from the outset, it was clear Omicron was already pretty active in the UK, so they weren't needed. But the government felt, from a health point of view, they had to introduce these tough, onerous restrictions from the outset. They haven't worked. They haven't stopped Omicron coming into the UK.
Kazakhstan's president has ordered security forces to fire without warning, adding that those who fail to surrender will be destroyed. It comes amid a violent crackdown on anti-government protests sparked by a fuel price hike. Around 2,500 Russian-led forces have been deployed to Kazakhstan at the request of the country's president.
The counter-terrorist operation continues. The militants have not laid down their arms. They continue to commit crimes or are preparing for them. The fight against them must be pursued to the end. Whoever does not surrender will be destroyed.
The Australian government says Novak Djokovic is free to leave at any time. It comes as his family suggests the tennis player is effectively a prisoner. Fans of the tennis star continue to protest over his detention in a quarantine hotel. He's awaiting the outcome of an appeal with authorities over a COVID-19 medical exemption. Officials say 2 other players who entered the country under the same exemption are also under investigation. The Australian Home Affairs Minister says everyone is treated fairly in custody.
Mr Djokovic is not being held captive in Australia. He is free to leave at any time that he chooses to do so, and Border Force will actually facilitate. We treat all people who are in immigration detention fairly, equitably.
The 79th Golden Globes will be a private event. The Hollywood Foreign Press Association says the ceremony will no longer be live streamed. What's more, the winners will be announced in real time on social media. The event's due to take place on Sunday with no red carpet and no celebrity hosts. I'll be back with the latest headlines in half an hour, but for now, let's return to Patrick and Anaya and To The Point.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Anaya and Patrick Christie's on your TV and radio. We've got a show full of all of today's big stories and big discussions that you care about, so here's what's on the menu.
Yes, well, leaked files suggest that Tory peer Michelle Mone and her husband were involved in a PPE business given 200 million quid by the government as part of their contracts, of course, despite her being the one who recommended it, apparently. When will we see Tory sleaze stop? Also, do you care, actually? Do you actually care? But anyway, carry on.
Yes, well, the government is reportedly planning to scrap free NHS prescriptions for over 60s from April, raising the age requirement to 66. How will these change hit your pocket?
Yes, indeed. And US President Joe Biden has hit back at Donald Trump for watching television during the riots at the Capitol last year. But does the current president still have the support of the nation? Well, we'll find out.
That's quite typical Trump, isn't it?
Yeah. He's probably watching himself on television.
Yes. Well, we have all of that coming up and much more across the programme. So make sure that you get in touch with your views, GB News, at gbviews@gbnews.uk. Good morning. Well, some leaked files appear to suggest the Conservative peer Michael Mone and her husband Douglas Barrowman were secretly involved in a PPE business.
The business was awarded more than 200 million quid in government contracts after she referred it to the Cabinet Office.
Yes, the document suggests the Isle of Man-based financier may have played a central role in the business deal that sold millions of masks and surgical gowns to the government at the start of the pandemic.
Yes, well, joining us now is writer and journalist Emma Wolfe. Thank you very, very much for joining us. So, I mean, gosh, here we go again, do we?
Here we go again. This is reigniting the ongoing Tory sleaze narrative, isn't it? And the ongoing controversy throughout the pandemic that Tory-linked firms have been profiting from government contracts during the pandemic. You remember from 2020, Matt Hancock's alleged links, £40 million contract allegedly awarded to a former pub landlord that was a mate of his in a constituency who had apparently no PPE experience at all, who then went on to supply government equipment. And this is not looking great. It's not a good time anyway for the government. It's not a good time for Boris Johnson personally, with the lingering sleaze allegations, which were all kicked off a few months ago with the Owen Paterson scandal. So Baroness Michelle Mone has been revealed as the source of referral between a company called PPE MedPro and the Cabinet Office. And as you say, Patrick, it was a contract worth £203 million. And the company went on to supply masks and surgical gowns. And I don't want to say anything that one shouldn't say. These are allegations at the moment. It's important to note that the lawyers for Michelle Mone are saying that accusations are based entirely on supposition and speculation and not on accuracy. But as I say, it all adds to this very unsavoury narrative around Tory peers, Tory donors, Conservative Party politicians. And I think even more importantly than that, actually, it's about the pandemic and how tough the pandemic has been on the poorest in our society, on how low-income households, small business owners, struggling hospitality, retail, all of these sectors have been really badly hit by the pandemic. We're facing a cost of living crisis, we're facing soaring energy bills, gas prices, all of that, national insurance, I could go on and on and on, high inflation, wage stagnation, all of that. And once again, the perception is that the wealthy and the politicians are doing pretty well out of this.
But Emma, I mean, I guess defenders of the government might say that at the beginning of the pandemic, there was so much confusion. It was a very urgent situation and they couldn't necessarily follow all of the proper procedures in all instances to get the masks, to get the equipment that was needed. And therefore, they used people that they knew that was close to them that could be able to provide those kinds of services.
you don't send WhatsApp messages, you know, to former mates down the pub, business colleagues. I mean, I think that I understand. Of course, it was a crisis. You know, remember at one point we were in danger of running out of PPE. There was real pressure on that. But government need to follow the guidelines. The people in power, especially cabinet ministers, especially peers, they absolutely need to follow the protocols. Otherwise, everything falls apart. And, you know, that's what Whitehall are for. That's what the Cabinet Office are for. That's what the permanent secretaries are for and ministers are for. And people are checking all this. You can't just be awarding contracts worth, you know, £203 million in this case of taxpayers' money cannot just be awarded to possibly chums, possibly business mates, and you know, possibly companies that you're involved with yourselves. That's just simply not acceptable. Otherwise, you know, what are standards for? What are the ethics committees for?
I mean, this has been an ongoing problem for the Tories for quite a few months now. I mean, but what can the public really do? I mean, I think this is sometimes where many ordinary people feel frustrated. They see these scandals and there doesn't seem to be any way that they can actually change it. I mean, the by-election result very recently could have been a way that the public can show their discontent. But it sometimes feels that, you know, we just have to accept it.
I think you're right. And I think what happens is people disengage more and more. I mean, if you just talk to, you know, the average voter, they say, well, do you know what? They're all in it for themselves. They're all lining their pockets. They're, you know, giving bungs to their mates. And it fuels the narrative that you can't trust politicians. So I think it damages our politics across the board. I don't think people have, you know, I think specifically the Conservatives at the moment, but I think it damages politics across the board. I think it tars the politicians and, you know, makes everyone feel that actually there's not much point because, as you say, they feel powerless. They feel that, you know, we're not all in it together. We have been following the rules and others haven't.
Absolutely. Well, Emma, thank you very, very much. Fantastic to have you on the show, and thanks for your time. And it's a wonderful-looking setting behind you. I must say, it's gone anyway, but it was a wonderful-looking setting behind it. Emma Wolf there, of course, journalist. Right, OK.
You made a good point, Patrick. I mean, you'd be interested to hear what our audience think. I mean, do these stories really matter to you, or do you feel that it's just, you know, just media hype or so on and so forth? I mean, do you really care about these stories of Tory sleaze?
Yeah, well, John's been in touch already. Thank you very much, John, who says, we were desperate at the beginning of this pandemic. Should we only have used companies that support the Labour Party if there are any?
That was the point that I was trying to get at. Maybe that is
I'm not sure how much cut-through there is. You know, we had the wallpaper... I mean, the Boris Johnson Garden Party, still Garden Party business, but whatever you want to call it. I'm not getting involved in that again. You know, that didn't have massive cut-through with a lot of people watching this show, that's for sure.
Was quite a repudiation, was quite a rebuke of the Tories, it seems. So maybe in some senses it does symbolise things that does cut through to voters.
Yeah, absolutely. Here you go, look, and yeah, I seem to have read about all of this months ago, comes out as a big story, Yeah, people are basically just saying that, well, look, of the people who've got in touch at the moment, they don't seem to particularly care. Someone had to supply PPE and protocols could not be followed at the time. Did the PPE get supplied? And that's the point, Joe, thank you for that. Yeah, Joe makes a point. I mean, the PPE appears like it did get supplied. So, I mean, money was given. Oh, no, all right, some...
And you need to pay for it as well, you know. So I think when people say this 200 million figure, if the things that were asked for were given, then I don't really know what necessarily the issue is. Is it just because they are connected to the Conservatives?
Well, I think that's the idea, isn't it? That it wasn't necessarily always put out to tender, but there we go. GB Views, gbnews.uk, keep them coming in. Well, we're moving away now. Over 1 million people will be drawn into a higher brand of income tax in the next 4 years, apparently, as economists warn that Tory tax rises are causing a cost of living crisis.
Yes, well, the Liberal Democrats accused the Conservatives of a stealth tax raid last night, with Tory MP Jacob Rees-Mogg urging his party to scrap plans to raise national insurance rates in April. Well,
let's go now to Sam Ashworth-Hayes. He's the Director of Studies at the Henry Jackson Society. Fantastic stuff. Thank you very much. Hello, Sam. An extra 1.5 million low-income workers apparently will be affected by this 20p rate. Just run us through it if people aren't massively aware of exactly what's going on and whether or not you feel like it's fair.
Yeah, so this actually happens almost every year to a greater or lesser extent, and it's kind of particularly noticeable this year because inflation has been so high. So the way it works is your taxes in the UK are set at a certain threshold. If you earn over this number of pounds, then you pay this rate of tax, right? And these thresholds are not linked explicitly to inflation. So if prices go up, wages will tend to go up with them. You can still buy the same amount of stuff, you haven't got any richer in real terms. If you earned £100 last year and you bought, say, 100 cans of Coke, the price of a can of Coke goes up, you earn £110, you still buy 100 cans. Your actual purchasing power hasn't changed, but your nominal income, what's the money figure, has gone up. And that's what they're taxing you on. So when they freeze the threshold and inflation is high as it has been this year, basically everyone gets dragged into a higher rate of tax. And this is one of the reasons I think politicians don't like the idea of index linking it, because it's basically a way, as people have pointed out, of sort of stealthily raising people's taxes.
Yeah, I guess, Sam, one of the worries that many people are expressing is the fact that we are already in a cost of living crisis. You know, energy prices are through the roof, national insurance being hiked, and so on and so forth. It does seem that the living standards are being squeezed of ordinary people.
So this is why it's particularly sort of, I guess people might, from a certain point of view, unfair. The reason this tax hike is happening is because we are in a cost of living crisis. You are getting taxed more because prices have gone up and wages are going up with them. You're not being taxed more because you're actually earning more. So it's in that sense, it's particularly perverse because you're basically punishing people if they manage to keep their standard of living constant. The only way you don't get a tax rise is if you don't get a pay rise. And if you don't get a pay rise, and obviously with prices going through the roof, then your actual income falls. And as you say as well, it's interesting that you sort of bring up national insurance, because we've had the national insurance hike, we've had these frozen bans. And so we have this sort of interesting scenario where a Conservative government, which would traditionally be elected on a sort of fairly low tax platform, is actually being sort of quite aggressive with its increases at the cost of living standards, but is also not really providing the sort of public services one might associate with a high tax, high spend economy. So there's electorally, I'm not sure that's going to go down particularly well.
No, good stuff, Sam. All right, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show, as always. Sam Ashworth-Hayes, Director of Studies at the Henry Jackson Society, just whizzing you through another element. When will it end of the cost of living crisis?
I think Sam made a really interesting point about this idea that, you know, the Tories are usually elected on a platform of low tax, and even if they've increased tax on this occasion, you would hope that the increase in tax will be met with, you know, rejuvenated public services and a whole set of policies that would actually, you know, support the living standards of people and voters. But it doesn't seem to be meeting that. So we have the high taxes, but the increased cost of living.
Well, it's a potent combination, isn't it? That's the point, you know, potent combination. And I've said it before, say it again, I just wonder when it all pops, right? When do people go, right, enough now, really? Because, you know, look, hey, no one likes to be skinned, and at the moment, it looks like we're all going that way, doesn't it? So there we go. Right, loads of you have been getting in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Keep them coming in, people. We love to see it. Not interested in the opposition and Ramona's making constant trivial allegations of Tory sleaze to try and manipulate public opinion. It's juvenile. That's from Dawn. Thank you very much, Dawn. It's strong stuff. Also, of course it matters. Here we go. The other view from Michael. The corruption in our government, parliament and civil service is absolutely disgusting. I trust none of them. That's from Mick.
Well, I mean, but Mick, you know, this is the thing that we worry about, that actually it does sow this sense of distrust and disillusionment amongst voters, to the sense that they don't support anybody, and then that is bad, I think, for democracy as well. So I do think there's a fine balance that we need to strike with it.
Well, Parker's been in touch. It's Labour envy, according to Parker. They're more worried about wallpaper on a state-owned wall rather than the important matters of the state. As a member of the public, this is from Steve, in fact, sorry. As a member of the public, I'm not interested in all of this. The alternative would be Labour. There's a lot of that going around.
Well, we've got a Keir Starmer, you know, trying to be patriotic. You know, maybe is that enough for you to support him?
Yeah.
A bit of British flag.
Bit of flag waving.
Yeah.
Bit of flag hugging, absolutely. Anyone who knows me will know me. I know that I don't mind hugging a flag every now and again, that's for sure. But yeah, I wonder if that's going to be enough for him. Bear in mind, they'll always be haunted by that video of him revealing that he used to want to abolish the monarchy. So swings around.
What, Keir Starmer?
Yeah.
And then the taking of the knee.
And then the taking of the knee.
That just sticks with me every time I think about him and Angela Rayner.
Oh, grief, yeah, I remember that. Gosh. Anyway, yes, and loads of you really getting in touch about this PPE issue, I must say. Yes, we do care about this. This is, of course, the fact that potentially essentially another, contracts are drawn up to the Tory mates for millions of pounds in the back of a fag packet at the start of the pandemic. Yes, we care about mates/family getting contracts. It happens all the time. But what's more important is where the PPE is made. There you go. Jackie's been in touch on this one. Just talking about, actually, we did buy a lot of our PPE from China. didn't we? And that's right at the height of a pandemic. Certainly not necessarily ideal, but
bring back manufacturing to UK shores.
Bring it back.
Bring it back.
That's
to
what we say.
This country.
Maybe you should run for office. Well, you did, I suppose, for a bit.
Yeah.
Do it again. Right, anyway, after the break, we're talking about the accusations of anti-Semitism levied at Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling, obviously shifting tone here, ladies and gents, the depiction, anyway, of the Gringotts Bank Goblins, goodness me.
Yes, but first, it's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Not for the first time this week. There's a cold breeze blowing out there, bringing some sunshine, certainly across eastern areas, but also quite a few wintry showers in the west. So sleet, hail, and in places some snow. Low pressure is dominating up to the north, and we've got this little kind of breakaway weather front bringing thicker cloud and wet weather to South Wales and southwest England. That's mostly rain, but it does have some snow mixed in over the hills of Devon and Somerset for a time. Further north, we do have some sleet and snow showers packing into northwest England, western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, and we'll continue to see those wintry showers through the rest of the day. Much of the east, bar the odd shower, dry and bright with some sunshine, but it feels cold. Temperatures 3 or 4, add on that wind, it feels sub-zero. We'll keep a few scattered showers going across the west through this evening, but for most it turns dry and cold. We will see a frost forming, certainly early on, but look at this, more cloud and rain then comes in through the night, and that will have the effect of lifting the temperatures. So frosty this evening. By morning, most places will be back above freezing. As the wet weather arrives, it will bring some snow across the hills of Scotland, certainly for a time on Saturday morning, but mostly it's just a wet old Saturday morning, and the rain likely to turn heavy at times over England and Wales, particularly through the afternoon across the south, with some gusty winds along the south coast too. Many places, though, brightening up through the afternoon with some sunshine, and after we start, pretty mild. Temperature actually dropping a little bit through the afternoon, but still milder than it has been. Quite a few showers then coming into western areas during Saturday evening. Some snow likely to continue over the higher routes across western Scotland. And then we go into Sunday. We'll keep the showers going in the west, certainly initially, but much of the east will be dry and bright. And for many, we should see a bit more sunshine on Sunday compared to Saturday. Goodbye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Good morning, everyone. It's now 11:26. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christie's, and Inaya Falarin-Iman on GB News. We're live on your TV and your radio this morning, so you can take us everywhere you go. No excuse.
Well, yes, the Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling is once again embroiled in a scandal. She's been accused of anti-Semitism after American comedian Jon Stewart compared the goblin creatures who run the magical Gringotts Bank to historic racist caricatures.
Yeah, isn't that in itself a little bit racist anyway? Although Stewart later claims that his comments were taken out of context, he sparked a debate within the Jewish community about anti-Semitic stereotyping in the wizarding world.
Well, joining us now is the editor of Jewish Chronicle, Jake Wallace-Simmons. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning. I mean, what do you make of this scandal? I mean, Jon Stewart, we must emphasise, has essentially backtracked on his statement, saying that it was a joke, saying that it wasn't really what people are saying. But it has sparked a debate whether or not actually that there is something embedded within society in terms of these caricatures. What do you think?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that Jon Stewart made these remarks. Initially, they were picked up by Newsweek, but later very forcefully denied that he was levelling any serious accusation at J.K. Rowling or any of the Harry Potter franchise as being anti-Semitic at all. So that's the first thing to make clear. The second thing to make clear is that the accusations of anti-Semitism, as misreported perhaps as they were very quickly jumped on by J.K. Rowling's increasingly large army of detractors and enemies, who aren't known particularly for their sensitivity towards anti-Semitism in general, perhaps, but jumped on this as a means to attack her. And so that's the context, really. In terms of the specific point, if you watch that bit of the Harry Potter films, which were, by the way, produced, they began to be produced 20 years ago, and the last one was produced 10 years ago, so they're quite, quite old now. This row's been around for a while. If you watch that clip, you'll see, I felt a bit uncomfortable, to be honest, because the goblins, they have long noses, they have, big ears, they're quite diminutive, they're wearing suits, they have huge piles of gold that they're sort of stroking and caressing, and the bank has the Star of David on the floor. So the whole thing kind of, combines to give a sense of an anti-Semitic stereotype and certainly rings those kind of bells. Now, there's two, issues that are related to that. The first is, was it intentional? And I think that, you can explain some of these things away. So, for example, the Star of David on the floor, which seems to be the most overt example of a Jewish reference, was there already on the set. It was filmed in Australia House in London, and it was originally an Australian star, which looked like a Star of David before it was changed to a 7-pointed star in 1909. So that was there anyway. So you can explain perhaps a few of the decisions away, but the whole combined effect of them, you have to be pretty dense not to pick up those sorts of tropes when you're watching it through. But the second and more important point is about J.K. Rowling herself. Now, her track record has been unequivocally to stand up for Jews throughout the Corbyn years in particular. She stood up for the Jewish community, put her head above the parapet on anti-Semitism when it was live in the Labour Party, in the same way as she's spoken up against the transgender phenomenon in more recent years. And certainly within the Jewish community, she's widely regarded as a good friend and somebody of sound judgment and a certain degree of courage as well. So I think that if you look at that context, then the fact that her films had ventriloquized, if you like, perhaps an anti-Semitic trope that has been in the air surrounding goblins for many hundreds of years, you can't pin that on her, is what I'm trying to say. Certainly I felt uncomfortable when I watched it, but that shouldn't be made to suggest that J.K. Rowling in any way harbours any kind of prejudice, particularly anti-Semitic prejudice.
I mean, Jake, some people have also pushed back saying that she isn't responsible for how the production of the cinematic piece ends up. So would you say that, it's primarily her and her own ideas and the things that were said in the book, or is there some responsibility also in terms of the way that these goblins were depicted, in terms of those who produced the film?
Well, look, I'm no Harry Potter fan myself. I haven't spent, hours and hours and days and months of my life reading them, so I can't comment on what's in the books. But my understanding is that the anti-Semitic tropes, if that's what they are, came largely from the depiction in the film and not from in the books.
Yeah.
And J.K. Rowling is well known for being very heavily involved with the production of the films. For example, there was a story around this week, wasn't there, about how she insisted on the actors and everything being British rather than Americanized. So she does seem to exert quite a high degree of control over it. But, if you're going to try to formulate any kind of criticism that she may be guilty of, we haven't gone to her with this, of course, but she may be guilty of, is not spotting it when somebody else put it in. And that, again, like I say, weigh that against her long history of standing up for Jews, standing up against anti-Semitism, being a good friend of our community, and being generally a good egg. I think that blind spot, if that's what it was, which is a very big if, could easily be forgiven.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something a bit more important at play. I'm very glad we got you on, actually. I was sifting through your online edition, actually. I just wanted to say, to commend you on the work that you've done. I believe getting the audio and video footage, obviously, of that attack on Oxford Street, having the audio analysed and putting a couple of things to bed, I think it's fair to say. So well done for that. And it's the Jewish Chronicle there. Jake Wallace, Simmons, good stuff. Thank you very much for coming on. That's that. That's the Harry Potter out of the way. Eh?
I mean, I just worry that this is really just another attempt to weaponise something against J.K. Rowling. Against her views on transgender identity. But,
Indeed. Well, look, after the break, obviously, we'll be talking about, not now bird flu, a confirmed case of bird flu in a person living in the southwest of England. But before that, let's take a look at the morning's news.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. It's 11:33. Here are the latest headlines. Troops are being deployed at London hospitals to support the NHS. That's amid growing staff shortages due to COVID-19. The Ministry of Defence has sent 200 personnel to hospitals across the capital, and talks are underway to expand the scheme across the UK. The new recruits are expected to be in the field for the next 3 weeks. Boris Johnson's been criticised by his standards advisor over lost WhatsApp messages in the Downing Street flat renovation row. The newly released chat reveals Johnson discussed Lord Brownlow's plans for a so-called Great Exhibition at the same time as the financing for the flat. Labour says the messages with the Tory donor raise questions about cash for access and ask the Common Standards Commissioner to investigate. A second juror in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial has reportedly claimed to have been sexually abused as a child. It follows reports earlier this week that juror Scotty David shared his experiences of abuse during deliberation. A hearing will be held on January the 19th to decide if Maxwell will be retried. The Attorney-General is considering referring the Colston statue toppling case to the Court of Appeal. It comes after 4 people were cleared of tearing down a monument of slave trader Edward Colston during a Black Lives Matter protest in Bristol in June 2020. Suella Braverman says the verdict is causing confusion and may trigger a review. Senior judges would have the chance to clarify the law for future cases. The Australian government says Novak Djokovic is free to leave any time. It comes after his family suggested the tennis player was effectively a prisoner due to his detention in a quarantine hotel. He's awaiting the outcome of an appeal over a COVID-19 medical exemption. Officials say 2 other players who entered the country under the same exemption are under investigation. You're right up to date. I'll be back with more on all of today's main stories at the top of the hour. We'll see you then.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Well, morning everybody. It's 11:37 and this is To The Point, of course, with me, Patrick Christie's and Inaya Folarin on GB News. We're live on your telly and we're on your radio, so you really can take us with you everywhere you go.
Yes, well, big story. US President Joe Biden has accused Donald Trump and his supporters of holding a dagger at the throat of democracy. This was, of course, part of his commemoration service yesterday, marking the anniversary of what has become known as the US Capitol insurrection. Obviously, there's some controversy. Some people say it shouldn't be called an insurrection.
What do you think it was?
I think it was a riot. I think it was a storming of the Capitol. I think insurrection is a bit of a...
Well, it was a coup. Well, it wasn't a very good one, was it?
No, didn't seem very planned. But anyway, Mr. Biden blamed the attack on the former president, saying he tried to prevent the peaceful transfer of power.
Well, the event sent shockwaves through American politics, obviously. Whoa, rippled through it, didn't it? But joining us now is US politics lecturer at Queen Mary University, Dr. Richard Johnson. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Have you ever seen America potentially more divided than it was that day? I mean, it's a silly question, really. There was a civil war, wasn't there?
Yes, I mean, there's a long history of political violence and mobs in the United States. It's something I've written about in a book where in the period, not just during the Civil War, but actually in the decades to follow, American politics was in an extremely divided situation. Now, a lot of the political violence that took place in that period was directed at state governments because that's where most of the political action those days took place. But there were examples of election results overthrown, governors chased out of their states and forced to resign. So there is this kind of deep history of violence and pressure that's put on the political system. So there is that historical precedent. Even the US Capitol, there have been shots fired in the US Capitol in the mid-20th century. Puerto Rican activists who wanted to leave the United States territorial claims and become an independent country, fired shots on lawmakers in the US Capitol. So this isn't really entirely new in American history.
Richard, but do you really think that this is, in the same tradition as perhaps, historical revolutionaries? It was, a QAnon supporter and a bit of, a few QAnon and Trump supporters almost accidentally getting into the Capitol. And also, one of the things that I think, that whole year, if not the past 2 years, was full of, violence and rioting in many different cities in America around the Black Lives Matter protests. Is it not more within the tradition of the rioting that went on that year rather than any kind of insurrection or coup more broadly?
I think there is a point to be made that there is perhaps overemphasis on the security breach that took place, and that is seen as, if that's fixed, then the problems of American politics are fixed. And I don't think that's correct. I think that what happened on the 6th of January last year was symptomatic of a very toxic political culture in the United States, where what's called effective polarization, that is to say, people's sense of disgust towards people on the other side is growing. There's a diminishing of losers' consent. This has obviously been most clearly manifested from supporters of Donald Trump recently, but I think to a lesser extent.
I agree.
But it was there with supporters of Hillary Clinton after 2016, with some of the conspiracy theories that went on there. And my concern is that we're approaching a situation where whoever loses an election, whichever side that will be, will find it very difficult to accept that loss. And that, I think, is the real concern for American democracy moving forward.
Joe Biden obviously had a pop at Trump, didn't he, saying that he was watching television while the Capitol was being stormed. Presumably Joe Biden would have just been outside staring at the pigeons. But anyway, if there was an election tomorrow, do you think Trump would win?
Biden's popularity is, his approval rating is lower than I think he would want it to be. We have to remember that actually he won the election quite narrowly in terms of securing the sufficient votes in the right states. Only 40,000 votes across 3 states separated Joe Biden from winning or losing that election in 2020. What he really Biden needs to do to ensure his re-election is to consolidate quite a diverse coalition of both people on the left, but also kind of moderate independents. And the approval ratings at the moment among that second group, the moderate independents, are dropping quite rapidly. And if he can't win back their support, or they choose not to vote, or if the left of the Democratic Party chooses to vote for, say, the Green Party, then he's in trouble. So he's got a very difficult balancing act. And so, I think that there is a chance that if Trump, if there was an election tomorrow, to answer your question, Trump would have a reasonable chance of winning that election. And I think Democrats have to think about how they will respond to that. If let's say Trump legitimately won the next election, are they prepared to accept that and see the process through? Because I think if they adopt the same practices as the Trump supporters of last election, then we're in a very, very difficult situation for the United States.
And finally, and just very quickly, we don't have a lot of time on this, but I mean, one of the things that Biden accused Donald Trump on was taking a dagger to the throat of democracy. I mean, do you really think democracy was under threat? I mean, he is now the president, the media establishment have coalesced behind him. In reality, Donald Trump, the elected president, was removed from social media. I mean, in some senses, the bigger threat to democracy is the power that many big tech companies now have over digital public debate. So, I mean, who would you really say is a bigger threat to democracy? Those that are able to remove presidents from the public realm, or Donald Trump himself?
Well, I'd actually see it as, I think that there are a lot of structural imperfections in the American constitutional system. That means that American democracy has never actually been particularly healthy. I think that the way that, for example, the Senate gives voters in California only 2 senators and the same number as voters in Wyoming, that was okay in a time when there were rotten boroughs, and Manchester and Old Sarum got the same number of MPs in this country. But it's really not fit for purpose today when California has a population larger than Canada, for example. I think the role of the Supreme Court is a concerning one. I think that the court has always been a concerning actor as well. So I think there are a lot of structural issues also that need to be addressed in the United States.
Well, thank you, Richard Johnson, a lecturer in US politics.
Dr. Richard Johnson.
Dr. Richard, apologies.
Doctor, for goodness sake, get it right.
A lecturer in US politics at Queen Mary University of London. I mean, I think it was obviously a disaster, that people were able to storm the Capitol. But I also worry about how that whole situation is being used as a justification to marginalise huge sections of the American population. And the way in which the media and the technological establishment have coalesced behind Biden, I think that's incredibly anti-democratic.
No, I'm inclined to agree. And I think it's important not to overblow the situation as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, absolutely okay. There were some deaths, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to minimise that. But what I am saying is that, there was a bloke who had what looked like a bear hat on his head, and quite a few of these people, and they essentially wandered into the Capitol building as well after a while. Let's be honest, there wasn't exactly a massive security operation there at the time, which I think most of us found a little bit strange. And they wandered around a bit. A lot of them just looked like they were having a day out, to be honest with you. Of course, then there was a bit more carnage, a bit more chaos at some point. But really, it's important not to overblow it. I'm not being funny, but if that's the biggest threat to US democracy, if that's as bad as it ever gets...
It's doing all right, I think.
It's doing all right. But, anyway, right. OK, we're going to move away from the storming of the Capitol building now. What we're going to talk about, something else.
The UK Health and Security Agency have confirmed a human case of bird flu in the southwest of England.
Here we go. I want to go back to the Capitol building now. I don't want to... So England apparently has also recently seen a large number of outbreaks and incidents of the avian influenza in birds across the country. Can I just say, I was worryingly ahead of the curve on this one, actually, which rarely happens, because a very close friend of mine, their dad has got an app on their phone, presumably from the last pandemic, or, I don't know, maybe he's got a thing for avian flu, but that tells you whenever there's an avian flu case in your area. And it's been pinging non-stop. This is around North London.
We've just had 2 years of pandemics and pinging and all sorts.
No, yes, absolutely. But anyway, someone who knows a lot more about avian flu, I imagine, than I do. We are now joined by Dr. Matthew Bates, who's Associate Professor in Microbiology at the University of Lincoln. Thank you very, very much. Right, how scared should we be?
Hi, Patrick. Hi, Anaya.
Hiya. How scared should we be? Should we be terrified?
It depends who you are. If you're a city slicker and you don't go anywhere near any wild birds or any hens, I don't think you need to be concerned at all. But if you keep poultry, then obviously there's a risk of you losing your flock if you get an infection in your flock, which you obviously want to avoid. So I guess that's my answer.
But I mean, in this case of one person now apparently having contracted this strain of it. I mean, are we? Yes. We're not in another pandemic territory here, are we?
No, the threat to humans is very low. So this virus, this avian flu virus H5N1, can infect humans, but cases have been few and far between, and they're virtually always in people who are working closely with the poultry. And I think there's virtually no evidence of sort of onward transmission from a human to another human. There has been sort of clusters of cases where you get a few cases at the same farm, but maybe they've all had a similar exposure because they're all people who've been in contact with the birds.
Okay, all right. I mean, there was a bird flu scare a few years ago, wasn't there? I think I seem to remember that was big. Gosh, remember when bird flu was big? Anyway, but we're not there again now. There's nothing. He's like you said there. The risk would be relatively mild. It sounds a stupid question. Does it just give you a cold?
No, H5N1, if it does infect you, is actually quite severe. So the mortality rates are up to 50%. So it's not a virus that we want to mutate to be able to spread in humans. But of course, that risk is always there. And of course, as long as there's H5N1 going through poultry and wild bird populations, you've always got that potential, however unlikely it might be, for some chance mutation to occur that allows it to then spread more effectively from human to human. So, we want to try and control this virus and keep it out of our domestic poultry, definitely.
Yeah, Britain's patient zero, as he's being called, is actually the rather ironically named Alan Gosling. Actually, 79-year-old grandfather. Now he caught the virus after looking after 160 muscovoid ducks. Is that right? Gosh, at his home somewhere I can't pronounce.
Buckfastleigh.
Well done you. And he apparently befriended them over a number of years. His family say, but unfortunately, of course, now his ducks have all been culled, right? And this is a reality for lots of people. This is a reality for a lot of people, isn't it? Now, there's no treating it, is there? You just cull them, do you?
No, it's quite a severe infection in the birds, H5N1, and the only real feasible control measure is to cull the flock. So, you've got an increasing number of sort of backyard homesteaders across the UK sort of growing their own chickens for the eggs, or if they're a meat eater, for enjoying some nice, homegrown chicken. And, there's a risk for these flocks. And so the current guidelines are that all flocks should be kept indoors to sort of prevent contact with wild birds. But that obviously presents a bit of a problem if you have free-range birds, and maybe you're selling free-range eggs or free-range chicken to a local supplier. And so that causes problems there. And so there's a lot of resistance within the farming community, those people who have sort of small flocks of birds. They don't really want to lock their birds up. And they also sometimes point to things like the pheasant industry, which releases about 60 million pheasants every year for the pleasures of hunting. And so if you're a small producer with 20 birds, you feel a bit, it seems a bit unjust, you having to lock up your 20 happy birds whilst people can still, go hunting with these millions of pheasants being released.
Well, exactly. I've never quite understood why people go hunting anyway, to be honest with you. It's not my idea of a good time going out and killing something, but there we go.
Well, you need to release the pheasants, because there wouldn't be enough pheasants. If you just allowed people to go hunting as they do, the pheasants would all disappear. So they have to breed them and then release them every, I think.
Killing to be kind.
I mean, you eat meat, Patrick. That's killed.
I do eat meat, but
someone has to kill
in a roundabout way, pay someone else to slaughter it for me. But thank you very much, Matthew. Good luck to you. Great to have you on the show. Matthew Bates, Associate Professor. Thank you. Associate Professor in Microbiology at the University of Lincoln. Good stuff. So nothing to be too concerned about, all right? We can all just breathe a little sigh of relief about the whole bird flu scandal.
I think this might be a reoccurring thing, a new disease, and we all panic.
Yeah. People might play a clip back of this, in like a year's time after we've been ravaged by bird flu,
Indeed. Well, GB views are popping off, particularly about the Capitol Hill riots. Mark has said it's amazing how Sleepy Joe and the left-wing woke mob can focus so much on a single day, but totally ignore the weeks of summer riots and consider those people to be peaceful.
Wow. Yeah.
Passionate words.
Well, it's passionate. Well done, Mark. Yes, and lots of you have...
That's an important point. They were called mostly peaceful protesters.
Yeah, that's true.
Meanwhile, there was a fire in the background. And so, I think that, the Capitol Hill riots, as I mentioned earlier, were completely unacceptable. But I think we have to also understand them in the context of a legitimisation of violence that was going on in the 18 months previous.
Well, absolutely. Fire, rioting, looting, total, complete and utter lawlessness. And it was very much a double standard. It's a good point, though, actually. Yes, we'll no doubt return to that. Yes, a lot of you have been getting in touch about the bird flu issue. Not more scientists peddling their scare them to death mentality. We've had enough of that already. Don't worry, Keith. We had a word, right? The bird flu situation should be A-OK, all right? So fingers crossed, fingers crossed. And yes, a lot of people as well talking about, as you've rightly said there, what happened in Capitol Hill. It wasn't a riot, it wasn't an insurrection, and that's from Dave. And yes, so there we go. Lots of you have been talking about all that. President Trump addressing his supporters and told them, we are going to go peacefully. Remember, we are the party of law and order. And he did say we'll go there peacefully. The idea that he particularly personally incited riot, I suppose, is... I just find that a bit far-fetched personally, but hey, plenty of people disagree with me.
Yes, and many people commenting on the J.K. Rowling affair and saying she is not anti-Semitic and the accusations against her are unacceptable. Wow. Thank you so much.
Well, yes. Thank you, everyone, for getting in touch. It's been a fantastic week here at GB News. We'll be back here next Friday.
Absolutely, and don't forget to check out my show this Sunday, 3 to 4 p.m. Discussion. Yes.
Yeah, get on that. Do yourselves a favour, everyone. What time is it again?
3 to 4 p.m. this Sunday, the discussion.
There you go. Do yourselves a favour. Tune in for it. Right, that's it from To The Point, but don't go away, because up next, it's The Briefing with Gloria Di Piero. Have a great weekend, everyone.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Not for the first time this week, there's a cold breeze blowing out there, bringing some sunshine, certainly across eastern areas, but also quite a few wintry showers in the west, so sleet, hail, and in places some snow. Low pressure is dominating up to the north, and we've got this little kind of breakaway weather front bringing thicker cloud and wet weather to South Wales and southwest England. That's mostly rain, but it does have some snow mixed in over the hills of Devon and Somerset for a time. Further north, we do have some sleet and snow showers packing into northwest England, western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, and we'll continue to see those wintry showers through the rest of the day. Much of the east, bar the odd shower, dry and bright with some sunshine, but it feels cold. Temperatures 3 or 4, add on that wind, it feels sub-zero. We'll keep a few scattered showers going across the west through this evening, but for most it turns dry and cold. We will see a frost forming, certainly early on, but look at this, more cloud and rain then comes in through the night, and that will have the effect of lifting the temperatures. So frosty this evening. By morning, most places will be back above freezing. As the wet weather arrives, it will bring some snow across the hills of Scotland, certainly for a time on Saturday morning, but mostly it's just a wet old Saturday morning, and the rain likely to turn heavy at times over England and Wales, particularly through the afternoon across the south, with some gusty winds along the south coast too. Many places, though, brightening up through the afternoon with some sunshine, and after we start, pretty mild temperature, actually dropping a little bit through the afternoon, but still milder than it has been. Quite a few showers then coming into western areas during Saturday evening. Some snow likely to continue over the higher routes across western Scotland. And then we go into Sunday. We'll keep the showers going in the west, certainly initially, but much of the east will be dry and bright. And for many, we should see a bit more sunshine on Sunday compared to Saturday. Goodbye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the briefing with me, Isabel Oakeshott. With further embarrassment for the Prime Minister after new revelations over his Downing Street wallpaper, we'll be asking if 2022 is looking any brighter for him than the shambles of last year. Also, Russia sent troops to Kazakhstan